The federal government just took a 90-year-old gun tax and slammed it down to zero. And now states like New Jersey are stuck defending bans that suddenly look a whole lot weaker. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to break down could save you from making a serious mistake with your own rifle setup. Hit that button right now, because most gun owners hear one headline, assume they're good to go, and then learn the hard way that state law can still ruin their day. Here's what just happened, and why people are losing their minds over it. For decades, the National Firearms Act, or NFA, put a tax on certain firearms and items. That included suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and a few other categories. Most people knew that tax as the famous $200 tax stamp. You paid the money, filed the paperwork, sent in fingerprints and photos, waited for approval, and only then could you legally take possession. Now here's the shocker. Starting January 1st, 2026, that tax amount dropped to $0 for most of those items. Not $5, not 50, zero. That matters because the tax was not some tiny side detail. It was one of the biggest reasons the NFA survived for so long. The law was sold as a tax law back in 1934. Yes, it also regulated these items. Yes, it also created a registration system. But the tax was a huge part of the legal story. So when that tax drops to zero, people start asking a very dangerous question for gun control states. If the tax is gone, what exactly is left holding this whole thing together? Now, before anybody gets too excited, let me stop you right there. $0 tax does not mean the NFA vanished. That is the first thing most people get wrong. The paperwork still exists. The registration rules still exist. The background check still exists. Federal approval still matters. If you want a suppressor or SBR under federal law, you still have to follow the process unless and until a court says otherwise, or Congress changes more of the law. That's the boring part of the story. But here's the crazy part. Even though the federal tax is now zero, some states still ban these items outright. And that puts those states in a very awkward spot. Why? Because they spent years pointing to the federal system like it proved these things were special, dangerous, rare, or outside normal ownership. But if Washington says, fine, the tax is zero now, then the political and legal pressure shifts fast. And that brings us straight to New Jersey. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the exact words that can protect you when an officer starts asking questions about your firearm. Subscribe so you don't miss it. New Jersey is one of the toughest states in the country when it comes to gun laws. And when we talk about short-barreled rifles, or SBRs, the state is not playing around. Let me make this simple. Under federal law, an SBR usually means a rifle with a barrel under 16 inches. Or in some cases, a rifle-made firearm under 26 inches overall length. That's the short version. That's the common way people talk about it. In New Jersey, civilians are prohibited from possessing rifles with an overall length under 26 inches or a barrel under 16 inches. The state's own firearms rules also treat those kinds of rifles as prohibited. So while the federal government says, you can have this if you do the process, New Jersey basically says, no, not here. That is a huge difference. So imagine this. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. You live in a free state. You file your federal paperwork. You get approved. Your stamp cost you $0 because the new law kicked in. You think, great, I'm legal. Then you move to New Jersey, or drive through with the wrong setup, or build something based on federal rules without checking state law. Suddenly, what looked legal on one side becomes a criminal problem on the other side. That is why this issue matters so much. Most people think the federal rule is the final answer, but the truth is, state law can still hit you hard. And in New Jersey, that danger is very real. Now this is where it gets interesting. Once the federal tax dropped to zero, New Jersey's ban started looking even more exposed. Because now the argument is not just, do states get to ban these items? The argument becomes, Why is New Jersey banning a class of firearms that the federal government still allows people to register, transfer, and own? And that is exactly where the lawsuits come in. On July 18th, 2025, a federal lawsuit was filed in New Jersey challenging the state's short-barreled rifle ban. That case was originally called FPC versus Platkin. The current public case page lists it as FPC versus Davenport. Same basic fight. The plaintiffs are trying to strike down New Jersey's SBR ban under the Second Amendment. Then, in 2026, the case got more serious. On February 18th, the plaintiffs filed a motion for summary judgment. In plain English, that means they asked the judge to rule without a full trial because they believe the law is clearly unconstitutional on the record already. Then they filed an amended version on March 17th. That is not a small move. That is the moment when a case stops being just talk and starts asking for a real court win. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the people who come here first for clear gun law updates without the fluff. Click subscribe and stay ahead of the next rule change. So what are the challengers saying? First, they say short-barreled rifles are still rifles. That sounds obvious, but in court, obvious matters. Their point is that if you take a normal rifle and change the barrel length or overall length, it does not magically become some brand new kind of object outside the Second Amendment. It is still an arm. It is still something commonly owned for lawful purposes. Second, they say these firearms are not rare in the way anti-gun states like to pretend. In their court filing, the plaintiffs point to the large number of registered SBRs nationwide. In other words, their argument is simple. You cannot call something dangerous and unusual when a huge number of law-abiding Americans already own it. Third, they say there is no long American tradition of banning rifles just because they cross an arbitrary measurement line. And honestly, that point hits hard. Because when you really strip this down, New Jersey is saying a rifle can be legal 1 minute and illegal the next because of a few inches. Think about that. Same person, same ammo, same action type, same magazine laws, same basic platform, but change the dimensions enough, and the state says you now have contraband. Here's the part nobody's talking about enough. The federal tax dropping to zero makes that old system look less like a tax scheme and more like pure control. And once that happens, states like New Jersey have a harder time leaning on the old idea that these items sit in some special class outside normal ownership. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. And there is more pressure on New Jersey than just the SBR case. On the very same day that SBR lawsuit was filed, another federal lawsuit challenged New Jersey's suppressor ban. That matters because it shows this is not one random complaint. It is part of a bigger push against New Jersey's blanket bans on entire categories of firearms and accessories. But wait, there's something even more important. None of this means New Jersey already lost. Not even close. A lot of viewers hear lawsuit filed and think victory is right around the corner. Slow down. A lawsuit is not a ruling. A motion is not a ruling. A strong argument is not a ruling. Until a judge actually strikes the ban down, the law is still dangerous for anyone who ignores it. That is the mistake I do not want you to make. Laws change fast, and court rulings can hit even faster. Subscribe now, because the next video could cover the exact court move that tells you whether New Jersey's ban is falling, surviving, or heading into a long appeal. So let's talk about what New Jersey is really trying to defend here, because this is where the title of this video makes sense. When I say the state is scrambling, I do not mean officials are running in circles on camera. I mean the legal ground under these bans is shifting. Before, the state could sit back and say, these are tightly regulated federally, they are taxed, they are registered, they are special. That gave them cover. Now the tax piece is gone for most NFA items, and according to Congress's own research service, The new federal law set the tax at zero, but kept the paperwork, background checks, and registration in place. That creates a weird split. On one hand, the federal government still regulates these items. On the other hand, it no longer charges the tax that helped justify the whole scheme in the first place. That opens the door to new constitutional attacks, both on federal rules and on state bans, that look even more extreme by comparison. And New Jersey hates being on the wrong side of that comparison. Have you ever noticed how many gun laws survive, mostly because people are too confused to challenge them? That happens all the time. The average person hears NFA item and assumes it must be basically untouchable. But once the cost drops to zero, regular gun owners start looking closer. More people ask questions, more people file applications, more people notice that their state is going further than federal law. That is bad news for a banned state. Here's what most people get wrong next. They think $0 tax means there is no reason to wait for court outcomes. Wrong. If you are in New Jersey today, you do not get to skip ahead just because the big picture is changing. You still have to live under the law that exists right now, not the law you hope is coming 6 months from now. So do not build first and ask questions later. Do not assume your federal approval beats state law. Do not assume a YouTube clip, a forum post, or your buddy at the range knows more than the statute and a live court docket. And here is the practical takeaway. If the SBR challenge wins, New Jersey could be forced to stop enforcing that ban, at least for a time. Then the state could appeal. If the state wins, the fight keeps going and the ban stays. If lawmakers panic, they may try to rewrite the law, rename the category, or find a new angle to defend the same restriction. That happens all the time. One door closes and a state tries to open another. So your job is not to guess. Your job is to stay current. Here is the bottom line. The NFA tax hitting zero did not magically make SBRs legal everywhere, but it did put real pressure on states like New Jersey that still want total bans. And with the New Jersey SBR case now moving through federal court, the state has to defend a law that looks harder to justify than it did before. If this helped you make sense of the chaos, subscribe right now and send this video to one gun owner who still thinks federal legal means legal everywhere. That misunderstanding can destroy someone's future. And one final simple disclaimer: laws change, facts matter, and your exact situation may be different. So always check current law and get real legal advice before you act.